Brilliant, thank you. I just wanted we have a quick. Does anyone want to do a quick introduction of themselves? I'll just hand the microphone down. So my name's Matthew Cotton. I'm professor of environmental justice here in the School of Social Sciences, Humanities and Law, and I'm kind of working on this sort of just transition aspect in relation to the REHIT project.
Hi, I'm Usman Siddiqui. I'm from University of Bath, and we are working on the ocean refuel project from Strathclyde, Bath, Cardiff, and Imperial College.
Hello all, I'm Jared Nutt from Northern Gas Networks. I'm a project manager and I've been involved in the research and development programme for H21 and the hydrogen heating programme to date, and now involved in the East Coast Hydrogen.
Morning all, I'm Eddie Halstead from the Environment Agency. You probably know us for being the environmental regulator for combustion and production of hydrogen, and we are pleased to be on the steering group for the Just Transition project.
Morning everyone, Dave Robson, External Relations Lead for Kellis Midstream. We're developing blue and green hydrogen projects. So you saw the video earlier about our H2 Northeast project at Seal Sands. We're also looking at green projects. And one of the things we need to do is make sure that we do it in the best interests of everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm Helen Dehan from Business in the Community. We're a national charity, our members are business, and we're doing work here in the Tees Valley, bringing business together and actually seeing how we can have an impact in our communities, so being that bridge between businesses and community.
Yeah, sure. That'd be good. Thanks. That's great. Thank you, everyone. So, if you can see behind me, there's a QR code which sends you to a Padlet, which means that you can input questions, which will then come up on this iPad here, which I can then ask the panel. But in true Blue Peter style, I've got some questions that I prepared earlier while you're thinking through. So, I was going to start with a general sort of political question, because when we're thinking about the idea of a just transition, it links a lot to government policy. Hydrogen came up in the previous government sort of 10-point plan for building back through a green revolution. One of the current Labour government's missions is around breaking down barriers to opportunity. And I just wondered if any of the panel wanted to talk about how hydrogen fits in terms of that mission of breaking down barriers to opportunity. Does anyone want to start? Yeah.
I think hydrogen's got the great potential to reignite everything that we'd like to be reignited when it comes to the industrial transition. For industrial and commercial users, there's lots of opportunity in the UK, hopefully. Hopefully the price of energy doesn't put everyone off. Hopefully it can be brought down. But I think there's lots of potential for industrial users to consider when it comes to how they both generate their own energy as well as use their own energy, and also become potentially a off-taker and a supplier of energy. I think there's lots of opportunity for industrial and commercial customers when it comes to hydrogen, given that, you know, if you're generating your solar and your wind and you've got a dark, cold day, you know, what do you use in the meantime? I think hydrogen's got the great potential to provide it, as natural gas does today, in terms of storage. On the day, you know, it's great to be able to turn your lights on and not worry about it. And I think when it comes to industrial users, I think they need to consider microgrids. Microgrids seem to be coming up time and time again now, in the sense of working together with other industry partners in the area, so you can work together on the same problem, whether that be energy, whether that be water scarcity. So I think there's lots of opportunity for collaboration when it comes to reigniting things in the UK.
Yeah, I think hydrogen isn't a silver bullet. It's one of many tools we need. And I think the key, option we need to look at is what's the alternative if we do nothing? We've seen the environmental risks, we've seen the concerns there. So we need to do something. So by using a range of tools, we can hopefully do that in a way which doesn't inconvenience too many people, definitely doesn't kill anybody or damage the environment, but enables us to live the lives which we need to live. And by doing some of the things we're currently doing, we'll hopefully be able to give job security for a lot of the people who may find themselves struggling in the future as the world changes.
Okay, that's great. I was going to ask a sort of follow-up question, which is around the key skills that we need to invest in. The question I always ask is it just as simple as investing in more STEM education regionally? Is that the silver bullet for the hydrogen industry, or is it a bit more complicated than that? That was a leading question, by the way.
I think the simple answer is yes and no. I think the key challenge we face as a country is getting the people interested in doing the necessary training, the necessary skills, wanting to be engineers, wanting to be operators. A lot of the training is common with a lot of the process and energy sector. So the bits there are common. There's additional things which people need to know depending on the role, but that would happen today. So if people move into a new company, then they'll get an induction, they'll learn about the risks of the process, and they'll learn about the things they need to do in terms of a risk assessment. I think, as was mentioned earlier, some of the risks with hydrogen, we're still learning, we're still fully understanding. So there's a bit more there, but I think it's getting the people in at the start of that process.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to contribute as well? No? Okay. Just to remind you, please do put questions up on this Padlet. I haven't seen any come through just yet. So we've got a question here from Prashanth saying how do government policies affect just transitions to hydrogen? Does anyone want to talk about the role of government?
I think clear direction and strategy is key for when you want to make investment. And when it comes up on high, it gives you a lot of groundwork to then be able to make wise and informed decisions. So the clearer the messaging, the better, really. As well as the feedback loop, I think it's great for government to be able to say where they stand, but I think it's great for industry to state their own case so that they can say that this is what we need, this is where we are. Can you tell us more? There's quite a lot of misinformation, especially when it comes to energy nowadays. So I think it's clear and critical that you need to be informed in the best way, but also not be misinformed.
Yeah, another thing that in way that government government intervention or government actions can be can be of more significance for the hydrogen economy is that for the public perceptions, it shapes public perceptions when more and more government funding is coming in, because most of the times safety is the first concern for the people when it comes to especially the domestic use of the hydrogen, and but they don't really know what's going on behind these safety testings and and what are the actually technicalities going behind it. But the government is kind of funding more and more projects. It shapes public perceptions that it gives the sense of safety and security to the people, that improves the perceptions around these technologies.
Yeah, and I guess just to add, from the Environment Agency's point of view, we aren't the government, but what we are seeing is, I think, clear political direction nationally and in the region from the Combined Authority Mayor that this net zero transition and hydrogen and carbon capture and storage remains absolutely part of that. I mean, just an example, the Chancellor met with our Chief Exec on Monday and released the working paper on improvements to regulators' performance to support sustainable growth, and hydrogen capture and storage does appear several times in that, in terms of a priority area for regulators to be responding to.
Thanks very much. Yeah, that's great. So I've had a few more questions come in. One, I think, is where we should really have started is, what do you actually mean by just transition? So the concept is quite a fluid concept. It actually started, I guess the history comes from the trade union movement in the United States around making sure that when you transition from a sort of traditionally fossil fuel heavy industry like coal mining industry, if you transition away from coal, how do you make sure that the communities that service that coal industry manage to reap the benefits of a new green industry that comes in its place? And places like Durham around here, with the coal mining industry and what happened in the 1980s, these serve as a sort of a warning from history for how to do this transition properly, so you don't leave communities behind. And so the concept of a just transition really encapsulates that. How do you make sure that the communities of Teesside also benefit from this, as well as the broader national benefits from reducing carbon emissions and industrial development and lower cost? One question I was going to ask is a bit topical. So the High Green project that that BP was invested in, it's been reported in the media that they might withdraw from that. What does that mean then for the development of a hydrogen economy? Is that going to stall progress? Are other companies going to step in? Any thoughts? I could turn that over to the audience as well.
So we are looking to develop green hydrogen projects ourselves. I think, you know, one of the key things we identified as we did some work with BP, Tees Valley Combined Authority, is the potential demand for hydrogen is huge in this area. The problems are A, getting it to the end user, and B, if you're looking at green, getting the grid connections to be able to produce it and produce it reliably. So I think, you know, there's many challenges in this area. We're already seeing some hydrogen projects coming up. There was, you know, one at the airport being organised there. But I think the hydrogen, you know, economy will come. The only question is when and in what form.
Yeah.
Just to answer that, again, some of the political kind of support for this has come in the form of sponsorship from DESNZ to what, you know, we are a DEFRA department to do a bit more kind of upstream engagement to kind of understand kind of what's coming down the tracks in terms of demand and I guess the environmental capacity of the three northern clusters to absorb this potential growth. It's the Environmental Capacity for Industrial Clusters project. So if you Google that, find the gov.uk link and you'll see the reports. But I mean, what we found there was between, you know, in Teesside alone, between 40 and 50 potential investments in hydrogen, carbon capture and storage and other sustainable fuels over the, you know, over the next 10 years. So I think, you know, the demand's there. You know, one investor's made one decision, but other investors are making other decisions. And certainly we're seeing a big in-tray in terms of, you know, people wanting our advice to support their projects.
That's great, thank you. So, yeah, my other question is: are there any other kind of environmental impacts that we should be concerned around? You know, it's good from a decarbonisation perspective, but are there any other local environmental impacts or regional ones that we should be concerned about?
Should demand from the Environment Agency start on that one, since I've got the. I mean, the obvious one, which is why we're all here, isn't it, is that it reduces or removes, you know, greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So it is part of the transition, just or otherwise. So I think that's the essential one. But I think we all understand that there are other impacts as well. You know, there's water resource impacts, there's water quality impacts, air quality impacts. I mean, I won't talk about individual sites, but I'd say I'd make that plug again for the Environmental Capacity Industrial Clusters project. And I think what that shows us is, I guess, the impacts in each of the industrial clusters is different. I mean, what I can say about Teesside is, I suppose the starting point is that, you know, the environment is impacted by human activity. You know, there's farming activity, there's you know, diffuse urban pollution, there's land use change, there's physical modifications to our water environment, there's existing industry that is already impacting on the environment. So that means that the River Tees is in a moderate condition in our jargon, our language, and it's everybody's job, it's ours as a regulator, but the country's job to try and get that to good. So we are still on a journey. But that said, where we are now is massively, massively better than where it was back in the 1990s. So I do think we do need to celebrate that we are in a positive journey. And I talked about, you know, some of the impacts, I think, in terms of the cumulative impact, not side by side, but I guess the cumulative impact of the potential things that could come. And I think in terms of water quality, Teesside is in a very good place. You know, we have benefited from that historic investment in the Kielder and the Kielder transfer. That's not the case in every industrial cluster. So we can't be complacent, absolutely can't be complacent, and I think there's work we can do to ensure that, we maintain that advantage in a sustainable way. Many of the projects will be happening on sites with a legacy of industrial contamination. So the investment, the funding that's coming into these new investments is actually an opportunity to clean up legacy remediation. Where I think we have to recognise there maybe are some challenges is around the emissions from these new industries to air and water. There will be different impacts. The industry are going to have to meet, I think, tough standards to avoid impacts on particularly the special protection area in Teesmouth. And we're starting to see responses from that in the industries we're speaking to. We're starting to see Northumbria Water make that investment as required by Ofwat to think about a long-sea outfall, which again could improve the handling of emissions to water in the area. So I think we do recognise that absolutely are challenges in terms of environmental impacts. But I think it's about that upstream engagement, just to kind of continue to talk about it, to understand them and look at opportunities to kind of tackle that strategically, I would say.
Ian Hibbett from BOC. Coming back to the just transition, as we're seeing very large projects arrive at final investment decisions, some are past that now. The skills we're seeing needed, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, process engineers, we need people who can weld materials together, we need people who can do steel structures, all of which exist today. In your view, what bits are missing that this new world will need that we can't do today? Because I see we need a lot more skills we already have, we just don't have enough of them. And I see more need for training of what we already do, but which bits do you think are missing?
I think you've answered a big question there about just needing more of them. But I think we need to instill in the people we're training up the ability to think, to do the necessary risk assessments, and to look at the bigger picture. We're entering into a world now where we're doing things a lot has been done before. So we've produced hydrogen in the region, we've stored hydrogen in the region, but we've not necessarily transported it into some of the industries it's going to be going in, potentially some of the domestic, So it's that thought process and the fact that they can't necessarily just rely on reading an instruction book. They've got to understand what they're doing.
Thanks. Yeah, we've had quite a few questions coming through around the idea of scaling up and some of the challenges of going from this kind of smaller scale production facilities to a larger scale hydrogen economy. And I guess meeting that skills gap is going to be one of those problems. But has anyone got any thoughts around some of the challenges of producing hydrogen at scale? Have another go.
I think a number of issues. I think a big one is skills and people, and getting those skills and people into the UK economy rather than them going, abroad, going offshore. Developing, these projects at scale requires a buy-in from the local people, a buy-in from industry, and a buy-in from regulators and politicians. And we just need to get that done together. But equally, I think one of the things we have in this country is we have a very reliable energy system. So we need to be able to understand the benefits of what we've got and work with it, and make sure that whatever we do, people can afford to live and work in this country. And I think some of the costs we're seeing are higher than normal, but we've got to work smarter to make that acceptable.
Can I just talk about community? Yeah, so I guess I sit in a room with the kind of people from the academia, from business, but I'm really here to talk about the community side. And we throw community in a lot, and we talk about skills, but our communities here in Tees Valley are facing a huge amount of challenges on a day-to-day basis. And I know we've talked about, the great work that's being done with the outreach and bringing children into the net zero, or doing a STEM ambassador and bringing someone in, but there's not a lot of continuity. And ultimately, when we've got some of our children who are in our schools, they can be really excited by what you've shown them and really see that potential. But they're going to take that journey back to their home, where they can have that conflicting advice of, that's not for you, lad. That's not for you, lass. These are the kind of challenges. We've got a huge opportunity here in the Northeast. And I've come from the South. We moved our family up here because we looked at the opportunities for our children who are very STEM related, but the barriers facing our community. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve now is, we talk about just transition, but what does that actually mean and look like for the people who are living in that areas? And they have been forgotten and they have been left behind. But we have a huge opportunity to bridge that gap, but we have to do the buy-in now. I've just been blown away already of what's happening. Most of our people in our communities are not aware of this. We've got to bring it down now, even if it's things that are happening down the line.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I wholeheartedly agree. The other question, I guess, that a lot of people have asked is around challenges of public perceptions of risk around hydrogen. So people have mentioned in the questions around some of the failures of the sort of hiatus, I guess, for the Redcar Hydrogen Village trial and acceptance of domestic hydrogen. Do you think you'll have a similar kind of challenges around industrial uses of hydrogen? Do you think you'll still have the same perceptual problems amongst communities?
Yeah, so public perception of or acceptance of any technology, like what the research so far shows us is depends on the numerous factors. But if we kind of group them together, they can be summarized into three major groups. One is that about the perceptions of the effect, positive or negative, about any technology. That involves, and that is affected by several factors like your familiarity with the technology, awareness about that technology, proximity with the projects that are out there in terms of your locality or how it is affecting them. So it boils down to that. But in terms of the Teesside and its areas, because of its industrial heritage, these things, Teesside has this unique advantage that people are more familiar with the handling of the chemicals and the large scale manufacturing than most of many other areas. However, there are definitely these perceptions are different in different sectors. So when it comes to industrial use, it's less visibility for the people, so they have less interaction with them. So there, it's more of and then these environments, the industrial environments, are considered to be associated with more high risk environments, and they are supposed to have expertise to deal with more hazardous technologies and chemicals. So the people's resistance is less when it comes to industrial uses as compared to transport or domestic uses. And then the most important thing when it comes to industrial use of hydrogen is that the benefits are of the larger scale, because when you talk about the decarbonization and of the heavy industry, it's obviously has a bigger impact than decarbonizing, for example, your boiler or a car that you are driving. So in that way, it's better, or public perceptions are easier to to mold towards the acceptance for the industrial sector than towards the domestic or transportation sector. Yes. So
one more question after this. Okay.
I was just going to pick up on that, and I think for the public, it's generally out of sight, out of mind. So if they don't see it and it's not impacting them, they're usually not too fussed about it. As long as it's clean and green, it's like, okay, that's a tick in my box. And nowadays, it's not even clean and green; it's more around let's make sure we've got enough energy. And picking up from what you said around, Redcar, obviously Redcar didn't go ahead, but there was quite a lot of public perceptions of positivity around Redcar. I wasn't directly involved in the project, but there's a colleague member here who was directly involved, if you've got any questions. But we found that the general census of everyone was, it's great to see there's something happening, rather than just the fact of, is it hydrogen, is it heat pumps? It's more that, oh, right, you're actually doing something in my area, you're actually impacting me, and you're actually doing something to further something. That adds a lot of credence to it, really, when quite a lot of the areas in the UK might be very inequality when it comes to energy, but also inequality when it comes to jobs and skills. So I think when there's projects of any size or scale, it kind of comes down to communication. Doesn't matter what that communication is, but as long as you actually engage the actual community, they'll actually be bought into it more, and then they can be your advocates almost, because most of the time it's you're trying to convince someone to give you permission or to give you funding, and if the people in the area and the people that are involved want that, they can speak up for you, really. So I think it depends on what level of scale you're considering, and I think when it comes to industrial, people are just like, yeah, go ahead, don't mind it. When you're talking about changing something within their home, that's when you're going to get people either not opening the door to you or generally telling you to go somewhere.
So thank you all to the panel for your assistance.